Hello to everybody. I am Giuseppe Rocchè. I am a postdoc researcher coming from the University of Palermo, and I am here to deliver a lecture. The title of the lecture is Can Disgust Predict Legal Decisions? Research on ex post rationalization in legal decision making. This lesson is part of the Recognize project, a project on law and cognitive science, which has been funded by the Erasmus Plus project of the European Union. The talk is articulated in two parts, which are recorded separately. The lecture deals with an experimental protocol that Michele Ubertone and I have developed and informally tested during Recognize intensive study programs. Our experiment concerns legal reasoning and is inspired by Johanathan Haidt's famous experiments on moral judgment. So in the first part of the talk, I will summarize Haidt's experiment on moral judgment, while in the second part, Michele will describe our experimental proposal on legal reasoning, in which basically we are trying to use Haidt's findings and Haidt's methodologies to cast light on legal reasoning. So let's start with the background, Haidt's experiments on moral judgment. To do so, let's read together the following story. Julie and Mark are brother and sister. They are traveling together in France on summer vacation from college. One night, they are staying alone in a cabin near the beach. They decide that it would be interesting and fun if they tried making love. At the very least, it would be a new experience for each of them. Julie was already taking birth control pills, but Mark uses a condom too, just to be safe. They both enjoy making love, but they decide not to do it again. They keep that night as a special secret, which makes them feel even closer to each other. So what do you think about that? Do you think that Julie and Mark did something wrong? Why? Which reasons would you put forward to back this conclusion? And specifically, do you think that Mark and Julie harmed someone or perhaps themselves? I leave you thinking about this for a few seconds, and then we will continue together. So this story has been created by Johanathan Haidt, and it is one of a set of vignettes that has been used by Haidt and his colleagues in a series of experiments that have been carried out in the 90s and during the first decade of the 21st century. Haidt was trying to understand whether moral condemnation of certain actions requires that the person who condemns those actions believes that that action is harmful. In other words, the question is the belief that a conduct is harmful a necessary condition for moral condemnation or not? If yes, if so harm is so crucial for our moral judgment, we would say that from a psychological point of view, morality is harm-based. If it is not necessary to find an harm to condemn morally a certain conduct, then we would say that morality is not harm-based. Then Mark and Julie's story is an example of what we will call harmless but disturbing behaviors, or harmless taboo violations. stories that are carefully designed to shock, but in which it is difficult to find harms and victims. To better illustrate this experimental approach, I will briefly show you other stories, other vignettes that have been created by Haidt and colleagues. So we have this first, in which there is a woman who is cleaning out her closet. She finds her old American flag, and she doesn't want the flag anymore, so she cuts it up into pieces and uses the rags to clean her bathroom. Or another story in which we have a scientific researcher, Jennifer, who is vegetarian for moral reasons. One day, Jennifer finds a human body donated to the lab where she works, which will be incinerated soon, so like the next day. Jennifer thinks that the incineration of the body would result in a waste of edible meat, so she cuts a slice of meat, goes home, cooks carefully the meat, and eats it. Haidt conducted different experiments using this methodology based on vignettes like this. Normally, he asked the question like that. He asked the interviewees how they judge the conduct, what reasons they give for their judgment, if they've condemned it, the conduct, and whether they see a harm and therefore a victim in the story. In a first experiment, a very important experiment, Haidt interviewed people coming from United States and Brazil of different ages, so like kids or teenagers and adults, belonging to different social classes. So like poor people from on one end, and like rich people and better educated people. To understand, and in later, instead, Haidt focused just on college students of American universities. To understand Haidt's findings, we should focus on two patterns of answers that Haidt and colleagues collected. First pattern, the group of people who said that the disturbing conducts were not harmful, but were still immoral. And then the group who said that the conducts were immoral because they were harmful. So let's focus on the first group. The conduct is wrong even if it is not harmful. The general finding is that morality is not always harm-based. For many people, morality is not harm-based, cannot be reduced to the infliction of harms, the violation of rights. There is more to morality than harm and fairness, to synthesize the message in using Haidt's words. In particular, Haidt discovered that cultural differences and especially social differences have a significant impact on the tendency to conceive of disturbing but non-harmful conducts as moral violations. So like people coming from poor social classes are more prone to moralize conducts that are harmless. And on average, Brazilians showed a tendency, again, to condemn more these harmless taboo violations than Americans, proving that also the cultural factor has an autonomous impact on our judgment. So these are the sources of our condemnation: social factors, cultural factors, the age, since also like the children and teenagers were more prone to condemn harmless taboo violations that adults did. But the general point, again, is that morality is not always harm-based. We cannot say that in general morality is harm-based. So what enters into the moral sphere according to Haidt's theory? Here Haidt develops his theory about the 6 moral foundations. The first moral foundation on the list is the care-harm foundation, that has to do with our aversion towards others' suffering, especially vulnerable people. This is the core of the harm-based morality. Then we have the fairness foundation, so our positive responses towards cooperative behaviors, and our negative responses towards uncooperative behaviors. Then the Liberty Oppression Foundation, so our positive evaluation of the fight against the dominators, the oppressors. So our negative evaluation of the oppressors, which may be like the oppression of the stronger over the weaker, or like the oppression of the state over the citizens through the fiscal system, and the like. Then we have fourth, the loyalty betrayal foundation, so our positive evaluation of patriotism, sacrifice, heroism, and our negative evaluation of betrayal. The authority subversion foundation, that has to do with our positive evaluation of respect, duty, obedience. And finally, the sanctity degradation foundation, which is particularly significant for us, as we will see in the second part of the lecture. This foundation is related to disgust, so our aversion towards certain bodily functions, certain people, certain actions which are considered as dirty, polluted, corrupted, and our appreciation towards people or actions which are seen as clean, pure, purified, and the like. So this is like what Haidt got, considering the first pattern of response. The conduct is wrong even if it is not harmful. I repeat, the general conclusion is that there is more to morality than harm and fairness. And so we go to we focus on the second group of responses. People who said that the conduct is wrong because it is harmful. Let's make a step back. Haidt and colleagues, as we remember, struggled to create stories in which no harms have been inflicted. Still, some people find harms and victims in these stories. According to Haidt, this is a crucial part, these people are not showing necessarily a different conception of harm than the one adopted by the evaluators, but they are inventing victims. They are inventing victims. An evidence of this, an evidence of the fact that they are inventing victims, is that when these people are corrected, they normally accept the objections to their justifications, but they do not change their original judgment, and at the end they remain speechless, dumbfounded. Haidt called this phenomenon moral dumbfounding, this idea of remaining speechless at one point. And we can use this exchange that is written in one of Haidt's book to illustrate this point. So we have the psychologist, the interviewer who asks, is it wrong for the woman to cut the flag and to use it to clean her bathroom? The person interviewed answers, yes, it is wrong. It is anyone hurt by what the woman did? Who? How? And then we have like these strange answers. Well, I don't know. Maybe the woman will feel guilty afterward about throwing out her flag, or the rags might clog up the toilet and cause it to overflow. Or it is wrong to cut up the flag because a neighbor might see her do it and he might be offended. But here, like the psychologist may easily retort saying, well, it says here in the story that nobody saw her do it. So would you still say it was wrong for her to cut up her flag? And here we find the typical and significant response. I know it's wrong, but I just can't think of a reason why. This is the typical ending of these interviews that shows this phenomenon that Haidt called moral dumbfounding. On the basis of these evidences, Haidt built a general theory about moral judgment. According to the rationalist model, reasoning comes before judgment. So judgment is the conclusion of reasoning. According to the intuitionist model espoused by Haidt, instead, the judgment is not the conclusion of reasoning, because the judgment comes before reasoning itself. According to this view, when we are confronted with an event, an eliciting situation, we often make certain judgments intuitively, that is, without deriving them from general principles and without being aware of the mental processes that lead to their formulation. Having made these judgments, we construct after arguments to support them. Here, the process is conscious, as opposed to the process that led to the actual formulation of the judgment. However, reasoning in this picture follows and does not precede the making of the judgment. So reasoning is a process that cannot cause the judgment itself. And moreover, reasoning has not the role of infirming or criticize the intuitive judgment. Rather, reasoning has the role of confirming and defending intuitive judgments in the eyes of other people, as a social function, basically. More precisely, there are cases in which reasoning may have the role of infirming judgments, but according to Haidt, this is not the main function of reasoning. The main role of the reasoning is the defense of judgment. At the same time, again, I will repeat, reasoning is the only activity that we realize. So we believe honestly that this actually caused judgment. We believe honestly that reasoning actually caused judgment. To use like a formula, we may say that according to Haidt, reasoning is a form of ex post rationalization. And Haidt, with this formula, means this, that reasoning follows, does not precede judgment, although we perceive the reverse relationship. Hence the traditional and reassuring idea that judgment follows reasoning. And so we arrive at the conclusion of the talk. Haidt's conclusion is that most of the time, moral judgment is intuitive and not deductive, and that it does not depend causally on the reasons by which we justify it. In the second part of this lecture, as I said at the beginning, we will see together a way to apply these findings and this methodology in the sphere of legal reasoning. So the first part of the lecture ends here. You find in this last slide some bibliographical references. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward you to follow the next lecture, the second part of this lecture. Thank you again.